In the annals of history, peculiar events often capture the imagination and offer glimpses into the beliefs and practices of bygone eras. One such event, as bizarre as it may seem to modern sensibilities, unfolded in the year 1386 in the town of Falaise, France. A trial took place, the accused stood before the court, and judgment was passed, but the defendant was no ordinary criminal. It was a pig. Yes, you read that correctly. A sow stood accused of the grave crime of murder, and the intricacies of medieval law were meticulously applied to the case. This curious event, documented in historical records, offers a window into the worldview of medieval Europe, a world where animals were not merely beasts, but could be held accountable for their actions in a court of law. The very notion of putting an animal on trial might strike us today as absurd, perhaps even comical. However, to understand this event, we must shed our modern perspectives and delve into the mindset of medieval society. This was a world where religion permeated every aspect of life, where the natural and supernatural were closely intertwined, and where the lines between human and animal were not as sharply drawn as they are today. The incident that sparked this unusual trial was a tragic one. The sow in question had escaped its enclosure and, in a moment of unfortunate timing, encountered a young child. What transpired next was a horrific scene. The sow, perhaps startled or driven by primal instincts, attacked the child, inflicting fatal injuries. In the wake of this tragedy, the town of Falaise was gripped by grief and outrage. The loss of a child was a devastating blow, and the circumstances surrounding the death only amplified the horror. The sow, its role in the tragedy undeniable, became the focal point of the town's collective need for justice. To modern minds, the idea of holding an animal morally responsible for its actions might seem absurd. We tend to view animals as driven by instinct, lacking the capacity for reasoned thought or moral judgment. However, the medieval world held a different view. Deeply influenced by religious doctrine and folklore, people in medieval Europe believed that animals possessed a moral dimension. This belief was rooted in the idea of the Great Chain of Being, a hierarchical order decreed by God, which placed humans at the pinnacle of creation, but acknowledged the existence of souls, and a capacity for sin even in the animal kingdom. This perspective meant that animals, especially domesticated ones living in close proximity to humans, were seen as capable of understanding and violating the moral order. They could be held accountable for their actions, just like any human member of the community. Section 4. Justice for the accused. The trial of the sow in Falaise was not a mere symbolic act, or an outlet for the community's grief and anger. It was a solemn legal proceeding conducted with all the seriousness accorded to a human trial. The sow was formally indicted on charges of murder, and to ensure a fair trial, a seasoned lawyer was appointed as her defense attorney. While the details of the trial itself are sparse, we can glean a sense of the proceedings from other animal trials that occurred during this period. Witnesses would have been called to testify, evidence presented, and arguments made by both the prosecution and the defense. The sow, unable to speak for herself, would have relied on her human advocate to plead for leniency or perhaps argue that she had been provoked or was not in control of her actions. Section 5. Public spectacle and punishment. The trial, as one might imagine, captivated the town of Falaise. Townspeople, eager to witness justice being served, crowded the courtroom, their curiosity piqued by the spectacle of an animal standing trial. The verdict, when it came, was perhaps a foregone conclusion. The sow was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. However, the execution was not merely an act of dispatching a dangerous animal, it was a meticulously orchestrated public event designed to send a clear message. The sow, in a chilling display of anthropomorphism, was dressed in human clothing and publicly hanged in the town square. Section 6. Order, closure, and the church's grip. This act of dressing the sow in human garb before her execution might seem like an oddly theatrical choice, but it speaks volumes about the social and religious climate of the time. The public execution, with all its ritualistic elements, served several purposes. First, it reinforced the idea of societal order and the rule of law. Even an animal, by being subject to trial and punishment, demonstrated that no creature, human or beast, was above the law. This visible act of justice reassured the community that order would be maintained even in the face of chaos and tragedy. Second, the public nature of the trial and execution provided a sense of closure for a community grappling with grief and outrage. It allowed for a collective expression of anger and sorrow and, with the sow's punishment, a symbolic sense that justice had been served. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the trial and execution served as a stark reminder of the Church's influence and the pervasiveness of religious belief in medieval life. The very notion of animal trials stemmed from religious doctrines that attributed moral agency to animals. Section 7. The Theater of Justice. The trial of the murderous sow of Falaise stands as a bizarre yet illuminating testament to the complexities of medieval justice. It compels us to confront the uncomfortable truth that justice, in any era, is often as much about spectacle and societal catharsis as it is about fairness or objective truth. One can't help but wonder, did the sow receive a fair trial? Could any truly impartial justice be delivered when the defendant was incapable of understanding the charges against her, let alone mounting a defense? Or was this trial, with its elaborate procedures and public spectacle, merely a form of theater, a carefully staged performance designed to reinforce societal norms and assuage the collective conscience of a community shaken by tragedy? As we look back on this curious event from the vantage point of modernity, we are left with more questions than answers. The trial of the sow of Falaise serves as a stark reminder that the concept of justice is fluid, ever-evolving, and often deeply intertwined with the beliefs, customs, and power structures of a particular time and place.